The number 5 player in the country, Jason Crowe Jr., commits to the University of Missouri. I'll tell you why I think he's the most important Missouri recruit of the modern era. Right now, I'm Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball, and of course, more for the Mizzou Tiger football team to prove this season after being picked 12th by, indeed, yes, some of my colleagues even, those traitors down at SEC Media Days. I'll talk about that in just a little bit, but man, very quickly, by the way, I do want to remind you this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And, well, I'm already looking forward to, speaking of first years, I'm already looking forward to Jason Crowe Jr.'s first year in a Missouri Tiger basketball uniform as the number 5 player in the country, according to a 24/7 Sports, has committed to Dennis Gates and Missouri. This found out just about an hour ago as I record here, and I gotta say, the more I think about this is the biggest coup, I think, recruiting-wise in football or even in basketball or football. Regardless, those two major sports, I really think this is bigger than Luther Burden III. I think this is bigger than Michael Porter Jr. I think it's bigger than Jeremy Maclin. I'm talking about in the moment, by the way. When these guys made their decision, I think this is an even bigger deal. And here's why. Because, well, some of you are saying, hey, just on the basketball side, well, Michael Porter Jr. was number 1 in the country for a lot of his recruitment, ended up, I think, second by most accounts. Certainly by 24/7 Sports, the same measure that I just used for Jason Crowe Jr., well, he was the number 2 player in the entire country. And yet, we can quibble about who was the bigger recruit there. If you want to say the 6'10" Porter was an even bigger talent at that time, I won't argue with that. Here's what I will argue. To go into Inglewood, California, and get a player of that caliber is really unprecedented in the history of Missouri basketball, certainly in the modern era. Since let's say 2000, the late 90s or so, when recruiting, the internet popped up. Let's just say in the internet era. That's a pretty good way to delineate it, really, is to draw that line there, because once the internet came along, well, a bunch of new websites and blogs, and obviously social media comes along, and now high school recruiting is just followed on such a different level. So I'm not going to speak to, the Stepanovich and Sunvold high school recruitment. I just don't think that's quite the same comparison, and frankly, I don't have the knowledge or the archives there to go back and compare it. So let's just say in the last 25, 30 years or so, to be able to go out of state, of course, Michael Porter Jr. from Columbia, Missouri. Well, what a great stroke of luck that was for Missouri for a bunch of different reasons, obviously. So to be able to go into Inglewood, California, which I don't know if you've looked at a map lately, that's quite a long ways from Columbia. To be able to get that young man, again, this isn't Luther Burden III, who grew up in St. Louis. This isn't Dorial Green Beckham, who grew up in Springfield. This isn't Blaine Gabbert or Sheldon Richardson, who grew up in the St. Louis area. This isn't Kareem Rush, who was a Kansas City guy. This is a guy who is a bona fide McDonald's All-American, and not just a McDonald's All-American, a guy who's probably going to start in the game as well. Missouri just does not get those type of guys unless they just happen to be from Columbia or somewhere pretty close. And even then, well, it's still a little shaky. So my point here is for Dennis Gates, who has certainly, last season was obviously Dennis Gates' best year as a coach yet. Unfortunately, the NCAA tournament was a disappointment. So for him to get this type of buy-in from this type of player who obviously has no real ties to Missouri other than, well, I believe there's some ties. I brought up Kareem Rush. I believe there is some ties. Maybe Jason Crowe Sr., his father, I think maybe knows Kareem Rush a little bit. So, hey, tip of the cap there to a friend of the show and a former Locked On Mizzou guest in Kareem Rush. But, hey, I just think to be able to get this guy from out of state and out of your geographical area, somebody who is this high of a caliber, give me an example of that. Really, we got to go back to, was Tony Van Zandt the running back in the day? Where was he from? He was from the St. Louis area, right? Am I wrong about that? Again, I'm not going to Google this really quickly. I'm sure you'll all be screaming at me if I got that wrong. The point here is that this is an incredible day for Missouri recruiting. In fact, it doesn't get any better than this in terms of Missouri recruiting. So let's celebrate. I know, Friday, it's happy hour. I'll let you go here really soon, but we got more to get to here on Locked On Mizzou, including some football. Of course, Eli Drinkwitz was, yes, behind the lectern and on the podium yesterday in Atlanta at SEC Media Days, being his usual hilarious and often hilarious and usually likable self. And I just thought it was interesting that, of course, Eli Drinkwitz aligning himself with, yes, the Big Ten's playoff structure, not the SEC's playoff structure. Yes, he's sort of playfully acting like this is going to get him into the doghouse with SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. But you know what? It was interesting. Drinkwitz, his plan was, I wouldn't say convoluted, but it was complicated enough that, well, some people aggregated his plan, tweeted out some sort of sketchy details of what Drinkwitz was saying, which caused Drinkwitz to then fire back at those people on social media. I just think it's amazing how Drinkwitz was able to own the room, and gosh, he's just such a natural at these things. The guy is a star, and more important than that, for the purposes of this discussion, he's a salesman. He knows how to make himself, famously, he'll be self-deprecating and be the first one to tell you he's not the tallest guy in the world, but he makes himself look big all the time. I promise you that. And to the point of him being a salesman, well, obviously he's a pretty good recruiter for the most part. That's how he's made his bones for his first few years at Missouri. But you notice how, again, to the salesman part of it, notice how no one in SEC Media Days, to my knowledge, is talking about Missouri's lackluster high school recruiting ranking for 2026. That could have been a big talking point if that momentum were to have gathered on itself, if somebody would have started asking those questions. But when Eli Drinkwitz is out there going, well, hey, maybe we should keep the SEC championship game, but have the third and sixth place teams in the conference play and the fourth and fifth place teams play for those last two automatic qualifying bids in the conference. Or maybe get rid of the SEC championship game and have a 2 versus 8, a 3 versus 7, and a 4 versus 6, whatever the heck, 4 versus 5, whatever the heck the format is there. Again, just a little bit complicated enough that I don't want to throw it all out there for you, especially in audio form. But my point here is that Drinkwitz, once again, positions himself, well, he does a couple things. He positions himself as a big star and a really important guy to the point where a lot of my colleagues who are at SEC Media Days are comparing him to Steve Spurrier. Hey, he's the new Steve Spurrier. Well, I don't think that's an accident. Drinkwitz wears that visor on top of his head for a reason. He famously loves Steve Spurrier. And also, again, there's a method to his madness here. I think he's trying to control the narrative, and he wants the narrative to not be, hey, what's up with Missouri's lackluster recruiting rankings? Because it seems like all anybody wants to talk about, the team that's right behind Missouri in the recruiting rankings, well, that's Hugh Freeze at Auburn. All anybody wants to talk about is why does he play golf so much, and why isn't he recruiting better, and aren't you playing too much golf, and just the umpteenth amount of jokes we've heard about that. Well, I just think Drinkwitz does a lot better job of controlling the media and controlling the narrative, and does it beautifully at media days. And you know what? Despite the Mizzou football team this season, well, if you everydayers will remember this, the Tigers, according to ESPN's FPI projections, have the third best odds to make the college football playoff in the SEC this season. Well, don't tell that to a lot of my colleagues, because at SEC Media Days Missouri, after that poll, the straw poll down there in Media Days, well, they're projected to finish 12th in the Southeastern Conference. So it appears not everyone got the memo. But I'll say this, I don't even think that's the most ridiculous omission, if you want to put it that way, from the voting. I think it comes actually on the all SEC players side. So let's talk about that here. But first, have you ever wished managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it absolutely can, because whether you're simply growing your savings or you're planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. And Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. And I got to say, if you've got, as most of us do these days, if you've got multiple bank accounts, maybe you've got a partner or a fiance. Maybe you haven't merged all of your stuff yet, but you kind of want to keep an eye on all of each other's stuff. Maybe you've got LLCs. Heck, we've all got multiple credit cards to get those sweet, sweet rewards, right? Well, it's honestly hard to keep track of all this stuff. It's easy to let something get overdrawn. Those late fees, that's not the way you build wealth. Well, trust me, all of this stuff adds up. You're going to be able to take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. By the way, one more quick thought on Jason Crowe Jr. You know, of course, one-and-done type of players, prospects, which Jason Crowe obviously potentially is as a top 5 player in the country. Well, you know, again, it's a double-edged sword, so obviously they're great talents, but they might not be around for very long. And sometimes when those guys go to a non-traditional blue blood program, you know, a non-Duke, North Carolina, that type of program, well, you do wonder, why are they going to that program? Yes, they want to, they want to hoe their own row, whatever you want to call it, whatever the right cliche is there, which frankly I'm not getting to at the moment. The point is, hey, I want to do my own path instead of just being another in a line of many great players at North Carolina, for example. Hey, that's all well and good, but what if you're going to a different place like Rutgers, for example, with Ace Bailey last year? Maybe you're doing it because, I don't know, you want to take all the shots. Or again, this is all speculation here. The point here is in Jason Crowe's case, I kind of like that on his elite team, by the way, at the EYBL, the Elite Youth Basketball League put on by Nike. Well, one of his teammates was none other than Tyron Stokes, also of California, who happens to be the number 1 ranked player in his class. That's the consensus. So basically, Jason Crowe can already play well with others, it would seem to me, despite the fact that he is an absolute fabulous talent as a scorer. In his most recent game at the EYBL, before setting his commitment, was just burning up the nets, 7 of 10 from downtown and to the tune of 36 points. Really, really impressive stuff. I mean, the guy is every bit of his high school ranking and just in terms of talent. Again, cannot wait to see him play basketball at Missouri, to say the least. But obviously, well, we're about what? How many days now? Let me look over my shoulder here. Yes, about 41 days away from the start of the Missouri football season. And of course, I'm getting excited for that as well, as I'm sure all of you are, but maybe not. Maybe the media isn't as excited as we are. The media over at SEC Media Days has the Tigers finishing 12th. Caden Green, your first team preseason all-conference player for the Tigers. The only other one, Kevin Coleman, the newcomer from Mississippi State, the receiver, made third team. And I have to say, no Ahmad Hardy. Do you guys know ball? What are we talking about here? I know this wasn't my Locked On SEC guys who omitted Ahmad Hardy. Hey, just because he's a newcomer, come on, let's know the talent here. Just fire up the film. Heck, look at his statistics. Look at how many tackles he broke last season. Believe me, he should be on there. Jalen Catalon, another newcomer who I would say similar things about on the defensive side. I'm not as in love with him as I am Hardy, but, well, that's a pretty high bar to clear. I would also say no Dalen Carnell is a little surprising, too. I don't know if the star position has been properly factored in to, the nickel package essentially has been properly factored into your all SEC teams at this point. I could say Josiah Trotter at linebacker. He's somebody I think could be an all SEC type of player as well. And also Chris McClellan, to me on the inside, has already proven he's that type of player. So a lot to prove here for Missouri. I have to say the doubt there on some levels a little bit surprising. I guess it's not at the same time, too. On one hand, this is such a strong conference, and when you have a team like Missouri that is not a traditional power and they don't have an obvious quarterback returning, well, then team, especially since the perception may be from some nationally, the Tigers were slightly disappointing last season. Well, if you play fantasy football, you definitely know the phenomenon of once bitten, twice shy, for sure. If you take a guy the previous year, I bet a lot of you had Saquon Barkley in 2023. We're probably a little bit scared to take him in 2024, and then, well, we saw what happened with Saquon. So the point here is hopefully Missouri is closer to the 2024 version of Saquon Barkley. And Missouri true freshman Donovan Olubade, the receiver, continues to get rave reviews from the coaching staff. So, let's talk about that young man and these crazy comparisons right after these quick words. And I'm once bitten, twice shy, baby. Sorry, I have that in my head now, so you must now experience that song and my craziness as well. By the way, it seems like my voice is kind of going a little bit here, so maybe I'll cut this final segment a little bit short here, but now the pipes are feeling a little bit better after a nice swig of H2O. So we're going to power through. The point here is that I want to talk about Donovan Olubade here to finish the show a little bit. Somebody that Brian Smith is very high on. By the way, watch my previous episode with the Scoutmaster that aired yesterday if you have not. Plenty of great information from Brian on this Missouri, well, this frankly lackluster 2026 recruiting class so far. But on Olubade, there's nothing lackluster about him whatsoever. Again, not only do the scouts love him, but apparently Eli Drinkwitz loves him as well, saying he's right up there with the best true freshman receivers he's coached so far. So that includes a couple real big names. Of course, Luther Burden III and Dominic Lovett too. So very encouraging signs there. And to me, just another sign that I would say Olubade, if I had to bet money by the end of the season, he's probably a second stringer in that Missouri receiver room. And by the way, on Olubade, I have to say he's the one bummer omission from the Missouri roster on College Football 26. So hopefully when there's a roster update in the next month or so, hopefully he will be on it. But speaking of that game, you know what I like to do with that game? Really, it's something I realized I do with this game. I kind of do it for basketball and I do it for golf too, which is I'm practicing for a game or for a tournament or for an event that's never going to happen. Honestly, like that's kind of where I am in my life. Like, for example, I don't even play full court basketball anymore. It's been years since I've actually done that, but I am on, you'll find me on the hardwood shooting and practicing moves and practicing my ball handling. Why? For what purpose? I don't know. I just like the process. I think, as Jim Harbaugh once said about him and his brother John, they like the struggle. It's not so much about wins and losses, although obviously you like to win a heck of a lot more than you like to lose. Either way, I think what I've come to realize is what I think I like about sports, what people are really obsessed about it, especially the older you get, you start to realize, man, those moments of triumph, while they're awesome, they're incredibly fleeting. One of the most fleeting things in the entire world. And actually, in the last year or so, Scotty Scheffler went on a rant post round that was really, really insightful, I thought, especially coming from a guy who is at the very top of his game, obviously one of the greatest golfers of all time, currently number one in the world. Well, he was just talking about how, hey, as much as I love to win and love golf, I just know that this isn't really ever going to satisfy me. I'm much more satisfied with, as he said, as he put it, just watching his son grow up, enjoying his family and all that kind of stuff. But hey, he's like, hey, don't get me wrong. I still want to come out here and play. I love practicing and all that stuff. And what I heard was, obviously Scotty loves to win, but again, I think Scotty just loves the struggle. I think that's what it is. And I will say this, for somebody, the fact that Scotty Scheffler understands that in his late 20s, by the way, that tells me he's probably going to be a lot better adjusted than Tiger Woods into his 30s and 40s. I'll say that. Another guy who I also love as a player, obviously, as all of us do. So anyway, thanks for sticking with me there on a little bit of a digression there at the end. Hope it was worth it. I can almost promise you that Jason Crowe Jr. is going to be worth it. I cannot wait to see him in black and gold and, frankly, see what else Dennis Gates has up his sleeve with Missouri recruiting going forward. Yes, I'm psyched for football, but man, is it fun to get some just incredible basketball news. Again, in my opinion, the best Missouri recruiting news we've had in the modern internet era. I really believe that. So, hey, if you think I'm wrong, feel free to argue with me down here in the comments or anywhere in social media at Locked On Mizzou. So, until next time, I'm John Miller. Thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.